You guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Talks with Antoine, and let's jump right into it. So I wanted to do a viewer's perspective dive on Wendy Williams' life over the past 5 to 6 years and her conservatorship, right? Entering the conservatorship, how did she get here, and the traction that she's now gaining to exit the conservatorship. So before we jump into that, I want you guys to look at this video.
How you doing? Halloween costume contest. We do it every year. It's always a lot of fun. Let's get started. Our first caress. That was not a stunt. I'm overheated in my costume and I did pass out. But you know what? I'm a champ and I'm back.
You guys remember this infamous video where she had, back in 2017, came out in the Statue of Liberty costume, and she made it to the front, in her intro, and then we started to see her stumble, eyes roll back in the head, and then she collapses. This is the infamous fainting video that went around the internet and memeified her, right? However, I believe that though she said that she just overheated in her costume, that this was the beginning of the demise of her health and the way the viewers saw it. Because not too far after that, rumors started to circulate that her husband was cheating on her, right? And that her husband ended up having a baby by the mistress that he has been messing with for years. And I'm pretty much sure Wendy Williams was aware of him having a mistress, and she was probably having her own fun too. Um, However, I feel like that once this went public, that this was the icing on the cake. And actually, I do vaguely remember her saying that, where she draws the line is that it's her public image. We can fight, we can holler, we can have, our arrangement behind closed doors. But if this makes it public and this, tarnishes my name, this, makes it to the forefront, this is where I draw the line. I don't know the terms of their marriage, but I pray to God that Wendy Williams got not only what she deserves, but plus some because of the way Kevin Hunter has treated her. Back in 2021, we saw not only the Lifetime movie, but the Lifetime documentary on Wendy Williams. And we saw that Kevin Hunter was emotionally and sometimes physically abusive and a habitual cheater to Wendy Williams. Wendy Williams spoke out, saying that she always loved the bad boys. She always wanted to feel protected. And I felt like most girls that go through that may have daddy wounds and try to seek that in men who overall just end up being toxic. And I'm going off in a tangent here. Always talked about her liking bad boys, and that he's been a habitual cheater for the last 20 years of their marriage. And like I said before, once this made it to the forefront, that's where she drew the line. However, this going public, I felt like really took a toll on her because in the coming years, we started to see her not only, drink behind the scenes because she's always spoken on how she loved alcohol, and not only that she, liked to have a drink here and there, she also had a substance abuse issue back in the 90s where she was doing booger sugar. And I don't think that was too far fetched because I felt like that was of the times then. But she also talked about how that affected her pregnancy and, her having, Kevin Jr. was like the miracle for her. It's where she kind of like was like, okay, I can't go back here. However, usually when someone who has a substance abuse issue drops one vice, they pick it up for another one. And I think this is where the alcohol came into play. And coupled with him being a habitual cheater and this coming out to the forefront and everything that she's been, going through, I think that only increased her dependency on alcohol. Wendy Williams has been through a lot. And I think that people lacked empathy because she did such a great job at exposing everybody else's business. However, when hers came to the forefront, we kind of saw her break on national television. And for me, I can still empathize with her because I'm like, despite her giving the mess, despite, her personality, she's still a human being. And, ultimately, I don't believe that she deserved that entirely, you know? Um, it was a public spectacle. However, I digress in that point. Moving forward, after the documentary and the movie came out on Lifetime, we started to see her arrive to set drunk. We started to see her misspeak. We started to see her like kind of lose her thought process, and we started to see her stumble on stage. Um, Leading all the way up until 2022 where her show ended. The last couple of shows was where it had escalated to a point we were like, okay, something's definitely wrong with Wendy Williams, and I feel like that the machine is pushing her to keep going, and knowing damn well she does not need to be on TV. um However, it comes out later in 2022 that she has, entered a conservatorship, and we don't really figure out why. We just all assumed that again it was the alcohol, right? Um, in 2024, Wendy Williams kind of disappears. We kind of don't see her from, time to time, maybe like some videos on the internet here and there. But in 2024, we saw a deep dive into Wendy Williams' life again. And this is where we kind of saw her at her worst. And here's a couple of clips, showing that.
Look, a thigh gap. Look, even when I do this, you see a thigh gap? And I have tears. I wish you would get liposuction. Okay. What the brand is this? UGG. UGG? Yeah. Put it in the same position, please. Close it all the way. Dumbass. No. Go downstairs, please, and order something and make you fatter. Okay. All right. See you in a sec.
So during this era, we found out that she was diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia and frontal temporal dementia, or FTD for short, right? So basically, it was an alcohol induced dementia. So she was starting to lose her memory. She was starting to not be able to care for herself, and it was induced by the alcohol. So everybody kind of believed this because the way we saw her presented on the documentary, we were like, okay, something is definitely going on with Wendy Williams. Everybody had a great laugh. It was a 3-part series. They ended up taking her out to LA when they shouldn't have. And, it was funny at the time. However, the seriousness behind it was that Wendy Williams was in a really dark space, and the people that are around her weren't supporting her. Now, during this era, she also had a guardianship as well, right? And we were trying to figure out why in the hell are these people being placed around her, knowing damn well that she can't get back on a podcast, knowing damn well that she does not need to be in Los Angeles, knowing damn well she does not need liquor around her. We had mixed reviews about, I forgot his name, that the male that was in her life who was in charge of her getting her back on her feet. We weren't sure if that was a money grab or we were actually seeing him trying to support her, because sometimes the way that he was speaking to her was borderline abusive. However, Wendy Williams has a mouth on her as well. So behind the scenes, this could be a back and forth situation. However, the woman that was with them, the one that you've seen in the clips where she said that you look fat, or you ever thought about liposuction, or go eat something so you can put some meat on your bones, we can see that she was definitely here for the money, because flying her out to Los Angeles was crazy. Saying that she can go to the Grammys in her condition was also absolutely insane. We also saw her lose so much weight. It was crazy. It was concerning. Now, I am jumping into 2024, but let's roll back to, I believe that 2022, 2023 era, where she ended up moving in with her son and moving in with her family, and we saw a short snippet of her on the beach walking with her son, and presumably she was okay. She was starting to heal. However, when she went back to New York and they filmed that docu series, that's when we saw the demise again. We were like, okay, so Wendy Williams was doing okay. Now she's not. Now we also found out that her son had her on a strict vegan diet, had her separated away from alcohol. She was starting to regain her weight. She was starting to look good again. She was starting to look like Wendy Williams again. However, being isolated, moving back to New York, we saw the demise of that. Now, underneath the guardianship, there was reason from said guardian, which is Sabrina Morrissey, that the family was taking advantage of her and was taking advantage of her money as well. So I'm not sure if I tapped into this. However, the reason why she entered the guardianship is because Wells Fargo had reason to believe that there were some unusual spending habits with Wendy Williams and that she wasn't in her right mind. To know what was going on, And I have reason to believe that she wasn't. I believe that she was getting taken advantage of. And it later comes out in the TMZ docu series along with NBC that her son was spending her money, and there was other people around him influencing him to spend these X amount of dollars as well. So we've seen over $100,000 on Uber Eats. We saw him spend over $100,000 on a yacht party, right? And in the NBC episode, in the docu series, he was presented as he didn't, he was camera shy. He didn't really like to be on camera. I really feel like there was probably some guilt in that because he knew that he was a contributing factor to Wendy Williams getting into that guardianship because of the way he was spending that money. um I believe that she still loves him. She says that this is still my son, I still provide for him. It's just that at the time he wasn't the best person for me. That's what she said, quote, on the TMZ docuseries. um However, since then, since the docuseries, we've seen her move to Connecticut to like this living facility where they had her in like this uh facility for what they call the memory unit. There was rumors that she was getting drunk out there. And I'm jumping ahead, but this is something that she mentioned while she was doing one of the interviews, and I believe that was for The View. But jumping back into that, right? So they moved her from Connecticut to New York, which they now consider a luxury prison. We go again without hearing from Wendy Williams, right? Also, I want to touch on the 2024 docuseries with NBC. Her family's like, hey, we're not able to get in contact with her. She can only call out. We, can't get in contact with her. So we seen her niece, come into play during 2024 where she jumped. We've seen her for a couple of times, and then we eventually see her after the docu-series is presented on The View defending her aunt again, right? And I think this was the train that needed to, start to see Wendy Williams exit this situation. After that, I also believe that this memory unit that she was getting placed in New York was also beneficial for her because it removed her from alcohol. It removed her from you know some of the things that was affecting her, which was probably seeing like the news about Wendy Williams and what's been going on with her. That the way her public image, I feel like, was being portrayed affected her heavily to the point, like I said early in this video, for her drinking. But again, I digress from that point. So she has, I'm not sure if she spent over a year in the luxury prison. However, we heard nothing from Wendy Williams in regards to that situation all 2024 until the very end. We started to see, stuff start to muster about her in November 2024, right? And this is where I say Wendy Williams was back, right? She ends up doing an interview with the Breakfast Club, and she is on with her niece and I believe another friend of hers, and she's been on the Breakfast Club a few times, expressing, how she doesn't have her cats. She is not able to go to storage. She's not able to leave the floor. She's only able to go to the gym, and it's super depressing. She said that the apartment or the living situation that she's in, it's not really conducive to her mental health. She feels trapped. She said, again, calls it a luxury prison. A lot of the sources compared, her freedoms to those who are actually incarcerated, and those who are actually incarcerated has more freedoms than she does. So then Sabrina Morrissey jumps out and says that, she is free to come and go as she pleases. She has enough freedom as necessary or as it allows for her condition. Um, and we realized that all of that was a lie, right? We realized that the FTD is something that she needed to continuously go back and get reassessed for. And that wasn't, the case either. She got diagnosed with that. There was no follow up from that. She's saying that she hasn't been seeing doctors. She hasn't been going to any medical checkups in regards to that for a while. Um, and we started to see Wendy Williams really come back. We heard the way she spoke, and we was just like, there's no way that she, is still suffering from alcohol. There's no way that she is still, suffering from this FTD situation. We feel like that this was placed on her, so that way they can keep her in this conservatorship. Now, this is where it started to muster. This is where she started to drop the GoFundMe. This is where she started to go to TMZ. This is where we start to see her on The View. And this is where we started to see the traction really, jump for Wendy Williams. Now, since then, right? Since that very first interview with the Breakfast Club, she was able to, retain an attorney. We started to say Sabrina Morrissey's name, which is her guardian. We started to see the judge start to speak out. We started to see a lot of rumbles in this situation. And I'm so glad that Wendy Williams is in a better space. I'm so glad that she is, moving forward and trying to exit this guardianship. One of the things that she said recently on the Breakfast Club is that, hey, first I need a new guardian and then I need to exit the guardianship altogether. Now, this conspiracy is going around, saying that they're only keeping her in this because they have been using the fuck out of her money. They've been manipulating, her into thinking that somebody else is doing it when it's really them, and that if they let her out of the guardianship, that she'll realize that all her money is drained, right? Sabrina Morrissey also files a lawsuit against NBC because the way she was portrayed back in 2024, and that there was no authorization for her to be filmed, right? But I'm like, if you're the guardian, right, you have control over the finances, you have control over, where Wendy Williams stay. How did you allow these people in her life that were on camera in her life? How did you allow NBC to actually do this? How did they move past you without your say so? You had to be aware of this situation, you had to be aware of everything that was going on. And I feel like that it was a plot overall to keep Wendy Williams in a place where maybe they are still using her money, or, keeping her in the guardianship because she's getting paid from that. And for you to now put up a $20 million lawsuit is a bunch of bullshit. But moving forward from that, we've recently seen Wendy Williams out with her niece because they say, well, if she can come and go as she pleases, she can leave. So she left, went to a doctor's appointment, went out to eat. Child, Sabrina Morrissey, along with the team, had, pressed charges against her niece, almost saying that she was trying to kidnap her. Like, oh, she wasn't supposed to leave. And I'm like, well, if she's able to come and go as she pleases, how the hell are you now, trying to file a motion of quote unquote kidnapping, um, if she's able to leave? And all they did was went to dinner. They, left the same day, returned back the same day. And even prior to that, I'm so glad that she was able to make it public because she didn't even know she was able to go visit, her father. I think it was her father's birthday, and she was able to do that. We seen video of her doing that as well, eating out, looking like she's enjoying herself. I fucking love that for her. Even prior to that, she was worried about being able to go see her son's graduation. She ended up being able to attend that, which I'm so elated at the idea that she's able to go travel and go see that. However, her going to see her family for this weekend and then having to go back to that luxury prison or that hellhole or that box, I felt like, is doing more to her mental health than actually, what has been going on in the past. And I also feel like that the world has moved past Wendy Williams and that whole divorce scandal. So I feel like she is able to make a comeback, though there's going to always be negative comments surrounding that. But I feel like that it was, it was something in the past, I would say. you know um Overall, doing this, short synopsis on everything that's been going on, I feel like that Wendy Williams needs to exit her guardianship. I feel like that her niece has her in good hands. I also feel like that there is now people surrounding her that are able to get in contact with her, that are, supporting her. I feel like the time is now for her to push forward. I, wish all the best for her. All the best for her. And yeah, this has been my short and brief, background on Wendy Williams. This is Talks with Antoine. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.
Your husband do that made you uncomfortable?
Wendy, he went down.
Down where?
Other guy.
Lucy, stop it! Denial is a river in Egypt. Your husband is gay.